I am continuing my reading. What I'm doing here is reading through the entire standard works of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. This consists of the Bible, the Book of Mormon, the Doctrine and Covenants, and the Pearl of Great Price. I am reading in a chronological order of events, not according to publication or volume, so I will be skipping around a little bit as I move along. Right now, we are reading the account of the building of the temple. And it's just been a lot of descriptions of the decorations. 2 cherubim built in separating the holies from the Holy of Holies, 2 pillars outside the temple, the molten sea and lavers and just all kinds of stuff. We are picking this up. The last 2 videos I did, I read the first half of chapter 7 in 1 Kings, and then I read chapter 4 in 2 Chronicles. Now we're going back to 1 Kings chapter 7. We're going to finish it out, and this will cover the same information as chapter 4 of 2 Chronicles. So here we go. Now, let me reread just a portion of the chapter heading here. So we'll just read the whole chapter heading again. It says, Solomon built himself a house also. For the temple, Hiram of Tyre made the 2 pillars, the molten sea, the 10 bases, the 10 lavers, and all the vessels. The molten sea, or baptismal font, rests on the back of 12 oxen. That's what we're reading right now. It's all about this temple ornaments and stuff. So here we go. Verse 23 is where we pick this up. And he made a molten sea, 10 cubits from the one brim to the other. It was round all about, and his height was 5 cubits. And a line of 30 cubits did compass it round about. And under the brim of it round about there were knops compassing it, 10 in a cubit, compassing the sea round about. The knops were cast in 2 rows when it was cast. It stood upon 12 oxen, 3 looking toward the north, and 3 looking towards the west, and 3 looking towards the south, and 3 looking towards the east. And the sea was set above upon them, and all their hinder parts were inward. And it was an handbreadth thick, and the brim thereof was wrought like the brim of a cup, with flowers of lilies. It contained 2,000 baths. So according to 2 Chronicles, it contained 3,000 baths, while in 1 Kings it says 2,000. Now this could just be because the measurement that is a bath changed over the years, and so when Kings was written, it was 2,000, but by the time by the time Chronicles was written, the measurement had changed so that now 3,000 baths would fit. Even though it's the same total quantity, it's just that the way they measured it changed. Just a thought. Thought I would look it up, and a bath is approximately or just over 8 gallons. So 2,000 times that's 16,000 gallons. I don't know. Anyways, let us just continue this. Verse 27. And he made 10 bases of brass. 4 cubits was the length of the one base, and 4 cubits the breadth thereof, and 2 cubits the height thereof. And the work of the bases was on this manner. They had borders, and the borders were between the ledges, and on the borders that were between the ledges were lions, oxen, and cherubims. And upon the ledges there was a base above, and beneath the lions and oxen were certain additions made of thin work. And every base had 4 brazen wheels and plates of brass, and the 4 corners thereof had undersetters. Under the laver were undersetters molten at the side of every addition. And the mouth of it within the chapiter and above was a cubit. But the mouth thereof was round after the work of the base, 1.5 cubits. And also upon the mouth of it were gravings with their borders 4 square, not round. And under the borders were 4 wheels, and the axle trees of the wheels were joined to the base, and the height of the wheel was 1.5 cubits. And the work of the wheels was like the work of a chariot wheel. Their axle trees and their naves and their felloes and their spokes were all molten. And there were 4 undersetters in the 4 corners of one base, and the undersetters were of the very base itself. And in the top of the base was there a round compass of 0.5 cubit high, and on the top of the base the ledges thereof and the borders thereof were of the same, For on the plates and the ledges thereof, and on the borders thereof, he graved cherubims, lions, and palm trees, according to the proportion of every one, and additions round about. After this manner he made the 10 bases. All of them had one casting, one measure, and one size. I've got no clue what they're talking about here. They got something on wheels. I don't know what this is all about. So that's just confusing to me. But anyways, verse 38. Then made he 10 lavers of brass. One laver contained 40 baths. So 330 gallons. Anyways, then he made 10 lavers of brass. One laver contained 40 baths, and every laver was 4 cubits, and upon every one of the 10 bases, 1 laver. And he put 5 bases on the right side of the house and 5 on the left side of the house, and he set the sea on the right side of the house eastward over against the south. So I guess the bases were to carry the lavers so you can move them around as needed. Verse 40. And Hiram made the lavers and the shovels and the basins. So Hiram made an end of doing all the work that he made King Solomon for the house of the Lord. The 2 pillars and the 2 bowls of the chapiters that were on the top of the 2 pillars, and the 2 networks to cover the 2 bowls of the chapiters which were upon the top of the pillars. And 400 pomegranates for the 2 networks, even 2 rows of pomegranates for 1 network to cover the 2 bowls of the chapiters that were upon the pillars. And the 10 bases and 10 lavers of the bases, and 1 sea, and 12 oxen under the sea, and the pots and the shovels and the basins, and all these vessels which Hiram made to King Solomon for the house of the Lord were of bright brass. In the plain of Jordan did the king cast them, in the clay ground between Succoth and Zarthan. And Solomon left all the vessels unweighed, because they were exceeding many. Neither was the weight of the brass found out. And Solomon made all the vessels that pertained unto the house of the Lord, the altar of gold, and the table of gold whereupon the shewbread was, and the candlesticks of pure gold, 5 on the right side and 5 on the left, before the oracle, with the flowers and the lamps and the tongs of gold, and the bowls and the snuffers and the basins and the spoons and the censers of pure gold, and the hinges of gold, both for the doors of the inner house, the most holy place, and for the doors of the house to wit of the temple. So was ended all the work that King Solomon made for the house of the Lord. And Solomon brought in the things which David his father had dedicated, even the silver and the gold and the vessels did he put among the treasures of the house of the Lord. Now there's 2 things there. He says he put them in the treasures of the house of the Lord. So not everything was made, and not everything contained in the temple was made for the work of the temple. There was also apparently a kind of storehouse in the temple. Now, if we take the measurements right, the temple is about 40 feet high, 40 to 45 feet high. Now, unless this is just a vaulted ceiling, it could be that there was a storage up above that they could put all these treasures. It doesn't describe it that way, but, it's a possibility. But anyways, it's very odd. But then they mentioned this in Chronicles. I didn't catch it then, but it says they cast everything in the clay in the plains of Jordan. Now, the Jordan River is east of Jerusalem. Jerusalem's up in the mountains, and the Jordan River is down here in the valley. And when it says they cast them in the clay, what this means, from what I can tell, is what they did is they carved out the shape of all these things in the clay in the plain of Jordan, and then dumped the liquid metal in and let it set so that it would have its basic shape, and then from there they could work it with chisels or mattocks, whatever, and put in the fine details. And so they did all this work, they shaped it, or they cast it down in the clay where they could carve out a mold for it, and then they would bring it up to the temple. I find that interesting too. Anyways, that is that. We will be ending it here. We will be picking this up in chapter 8. Look forward for that. See you then.